Let's shift our focus from India to the global order. Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh, how hopeful are you with the Trump presidency for a more stable global order? We saw that in Donald Trump's last term, the US opted out of the Paris Climate Accord, the nuclear deal with Iran, transatlantic trade and investment treaty, and he has already signaled that he isn't invested in the Ukraine conflict the same way Biden administration was. Do you think he might follow suit again with a more protectionist and isolationist policy?
So if you saw his speech today that Professor Swaran Singh was speaking about, one of the things he said was no new wars. That there were no wars during my 4 years except the fight against ISIS. Now no new wars. So that's one dimension. So given what he said earlier and given what happened in Trump 1.0, there are a few things one can expect and a few things it's difficult to visualize which way it will go. On the Russia-Ukraine conflict, I think Trump will have the political capital if he wants to bring the active phase of the conflict to an end. He has been less adversarial towards Russia compared to the Biden-Harris administration. He has been less sympathetic to the Ukrainian leadership. So I don't think they can resolve the issue, but at least the active phase of the conflict. And I think from India's point of view, that certainly be helpful, because if that happens, then India's own economic, political, defense relationship with Russia will not come under the same adversarial gaze from the US and West. So that's one dimension. I don't think we can quite anticipate what will happen in West Asia, because Israel perceives that Donald Trump, at least Prime Minister Netanyahu, perceives that Donald Trump will be far more supportive of him than the Biden-Harris administration had been, which was quite supportive. Trump has himself said recently that Netanyahu should go ahead and do what he wants. In Trump 1.0, he moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which previous administration had not done. He unilaterally recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. So he was very, very supportive of Israel. So given that, my sense is that Israel would not see itself as coming under any pressure from a Trump administration in terms of whatever they may be doing in Gaza or Lebanon, except their own capacity to sustain conflict beyond a certain length of time, because the Israeli economy is taking a hit. You know, it's a country of 7 million people. If more than 400,000 have been mobilized and reservists have been mobilized, the economy and the high-tech economy will take a hit. So they have to figure out how long they want to sustain it. I think Iran will come under more pressure. How does that impact the Israel-Iran dynamic? We'll have to see. How does that impact the Iran-Arab countries dynamic, where they were trying to build some kind of a working relationship? We'll have to see. It was Trump that had got the Abraham Accords going in 2020. Now, given the new situation with the conflict in Gaza and Lebanon, can elements of that be revived? We don't know. So I think how the conflict will play out in West Asia will be uncertain, except beyond saying that at least in the initial phase, Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu will see Trump as more supportive than Biden had been. Now that takes us to the third major theater of conflict, which is China. And there, if you remember, it was the Trump administration, as distinct from the Clinton team, which had called China a strategic partner. Bush had called China a strategic competitor, but had not done very much because they were preoccupied with post-9/11 activity in Afghanistan. The Obama administration was confused. In the beginning, they called talk of strategic reassurance to China. Then they spoke of pivot or rebalance to Asia. They couldn't do even that. It was Trump that came forward in his national security strategy, national defense strategy, clearly saying that China is the main economic, technological, military competitor for the US. And then you saw these moves towards technology restrictions, towards tariffs, and the Biden administration had continued with that. So I would think that broadly, the policy of strong trade and technology measures related to China, seeing China as an adversary, will continue. And it was Trump that had revived the Quad. It has Trump that has started talking of the Indo-Pacific strategy and renamed the Pacific Command based in Hawaii as the Indo-Pacific Command, signaling that, they saw India as an important partner. But if Trump is showing a more accommodative feature in Europe, he'll have to show a harder posture somewhere else, because the US population wants to see a strong leader. And then China will provide him that theater to at least publicly project a tough posture. But that having been said, as we saw in Trump 1.0, and also as came out in the writings of many people who worked with him, including his national security advisors, Bolton and McMaster, completely erratic and unpredictable in his decision-making. Takes one decision now, then somebody else speaks to him, changes the decision. And despite the strong posture on China, in 2019, he met President Xi and said to him that if you buy more farm produce from Midwest states, I'll change my policy towards China. In January 2020, he did a limited phase one trade agreement with China, which the Chinese didn't implement. And then it very strange sight of a US president signing an agreement with a visiting Chinese vice prime minister. Which is very unusual, but obviously he was looking for some political gain. Then he criticized Pakistan in his South Asia strategy in July 2017. In January 2018, he tweeted that we must stop all aid to Pakistan, they have hoodwinked us. And in 2019, he invites Imran Khan to the White House because he wanted help from Pakistan in terms of dialogue with the Taliban. And there he says that I'm ready to mediate on Kashmir, and that the Indian Prime Minister has asked me to mediate on Kashmir, and there's no truth in that. And the Indian Foreign Minister had to make a speech in Parliament that there's no truth what the President said. So here's a President of a major country not conditioned by facts in terms of policy articulation he's doing. So there will be certain policies that we can expect, but we should be prepared for certain element of an erratic, unpredictable behavior in his decision-making.
Professor Swaran Singh, your thought?
I agree with what Ambassador Singh is saying. Fundamentally, we will see more unpredictability, more whimsical, more volatility. And if you want to look at how Russia or China are looking at that possibility, they think it's going to be good for them, because that kind of leadership of the liberal world order is going to gradually create more dissensions. And we saw during his last term also within US friends and allies. I did mention India was an exception, but also very cautious. And if that happens, the G7 cohesion or G7 efficacy in leading the world could become increasingly vulnerable. We are already seeing, we have a diplomat from Turkey sitting here. A NATO member is trying to join BRICS. ASEAN countries are trying to join BRICS as well. So that kind of drift is, as the Chinese see themselves, if you read their media, is going to be good for China to use that window to cultivate all these multiple friends of United States and allies of United States. This has already been gradually happening. Many of them are, if not directly, indirectly partners of China's Belt and Road Initiative without calling it so. So volatility, unreliability is going to be something that we might see happening in coming 4 years, and which is where President Putin will be more comfortable that there is no united front facing him, and there are more chinks in the armor where he can sort of continue to survive. But China particularly will use that opportunity. It had already during the last term become the flag bearer of globalization, free trade and so on. And it even now raises slogan of democracy. So in that sense, volatility in that American leadership of the global world order could drift the world order itself in many ways. Already we know the common sentiment among G7 about protectionism increasingly becoming a significant orientation. And free trade slogans are coming now from Chinese instead of Americans instead. So I think increasingly volatile, uncertain, confused, unpredictable kind of leadership from United States will fundamentally make all its allies and friends look for themselves in more autonomous terms and evolve their own equations with other power centers around the world, including United States in that sense. So I agree the fact that Trump had not just mentioned in mediating in Kashmir, he'd also offered mediating in India-China conflict. But again, India had said that we can manage our difficulties ourselves. Fundamentally, question here is what is going to happen to United States and its own institutions, its own social fabric, its politics, which might see a much bigger churn than the global world order, because global world order has several other stakeholders, several other powers that will use that opportunity to take over the leadership in many areas. India has already become leader in many areas. China is a leader in many areas. In that sense, I think it's a greater impact that US people at home are going to face rather than the world at large is going to face. World is also, this whole discussion that Joseph Nye talks about diffusion of power, that it's not decline of United States, it's diffusion of power. Over time, more and more states will share greater responsibilities and power and opportunities and so on. And in that diffusion, several other actors are going to become much more significant players in determining the trends around the world.